We start off every show. I ask the guests to just self-introduce in your own words. Can you describe who you are and your current profession?
My name is Megan Shub. And, it's interesting that you ask how I describe myself because I just had a conversation yesterday. I was with a bunch of artists in Korea. And in Korea, everybody has a business card, okay? It's just part of the routine. When you meet people, you exchange cards. And I still don't have a card. And I'm deeply embarrassed and ashamed that I don't have my card. So I think I kind of deflect that by making that the discussion when the card exchange happens. And I was just like, I don't know what I would put on my card. Like, I think I haven't gotten one because I don't know. There's too much that I would put on my card. I think I would just have to put my name. I'm and I don't mean this in like a self-aggrandizing way. It's just that I'm just interested in so many different things, and I do work in so many different mediums that it's just kind of true. So I'm a producer, I am a writer, I write fiction, I write nonfiction, I am directing, I do theater, I do television. Yes, I guess I have a lot I have a lot going on.
You definitely, wow. That's a honestly quite sweet and endearing introduction. I also feel tagged here. I feel added as someone who is also interested in a lot of different things and has a hard time sort of self-describing. Of course, we met specifically because of your role as a producer with John Oliver.
Yes.
What do you call it in short? Do you say last week? Do you say the John Oliver show? What do you say?
Usually because we do so much work on Slack, it's like LWT. Yep. But yeah, I think in person we say like last week tonight. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
it's been a while for me in person.
Yeah?
Yeah.
When did you move to Korea?
I moved at the very end of May 2024.
Wow.
So it's been about 8 months.
Are you cool sharing even just like a taste, like why?
Well, first of all, it wasn't something that was pre-planned far in advance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The opportunity to interview for a job came up for my husband, okay? Mm-hmm. And I have a policy, we both do, where you always say yes to the interview, okay? Like, I'm here with you, Elijah.
Thank you.
You should always say yes because you don't know, even if you're not interested in a particular role, you never know where it's going to lead you. Mm-hmm. So, he did it. And, lo and behold, they ended up offering him the job. And, beyond that, we did always have an interest in working in Asia. I used to do work with like Chinese folk art back in college. And, not to get too much into my husband's role, but he has worked for the account that he's working on for some time. So, even back in New York. So, now that we're here, it does make sense that we're here. But at the time, it felt like a wild card. But it is a good lesson in saying yes to those opportunities. And sometimes you're not sure if it's the right thing. Like moving to Korea, I have 2 small children and a career. It wasn't necessarily an easy decision. And there would have been a million reasons for me not to have done it. But it felt like it would be exciting. And so we said yes. And of course, we're very glad that we're here now.
I feel maybe this is like a thing amongst like creative people who do theater because we have this in common, but like it feels very much like the way, I don't know, I feel cut from the same cloth in this idea of just like sometimes the universe has a plan for you or there's an opportunity there for you. So this philosophy of just take the interview,
yes,
like at least see what's being offered to you, is such a useful like guiding philosophy on how to be, especially in the context of like a discussion here of like how do you make a living in the creative like spaces.
Yes.
Like I feel like most of my successes literally is like, I don't know, it seems like there's a good opportunity here. I don't know what it's going to look like, you know, and then great, amazing things happen because it's like staying open-minded. But this, to be here at the beginning of 2025, living in the US and you're living in Korea, you know, I can't lie, I'm a little envious.
I get that a lot. But you know what? Let me just counter with this, okay? There's no escaping the U.S., okay? And especially for me, you know, I'm very much plugged into what's going on in the U.S. And even just beyond me and my personal experience and work, you know, for everyone all over the world, the influence of the executive office is quite intense, as we've been seeing in the last few weeks, you know. And especially Korea has a very big relationship with the United States. So, and then there's also the sort of history between the president of the United States and the leader of North Korea, right? So, and that kind of reverberates. So I have not escaped it. I'm glad that I don't live there right now, but I have certainly not escaped it.
Wow. These are fascinating times that we're living in.
I know. I wish they were fascinating for happier reasons.
There's a meme here that I feel like keeps coming up. Maybe you've seen this one. It's like, geez, I wish I wasn't living through a historic event right now.
Yeah, I think I'm familiar with that. Yes. Like the unprecedented times.
Yeah. It's like, oh, great. Another historical event that I wish I wasn't experiencing right now.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, it feels like there's a lot we could say here. I feel like I should start with probably the clickbaitiest thing that just like folks listening are going to want to know first, which is like how you got to work with, what should I say, John Oliver, or should I say LWT? How did you come? Because I've talked to you, we talked 2 or 3 years ago.
Sadly, I think it was like 4.
Oh my God. I don't know. That makes sense. Sorry. I've been working on this huge PFAS doc now for like 7, almost 8 years.
Yeah.
So it feels like my entire adult life, like my whole 20s basically.
Yes.
So to me, it's all made up. But yes, we talked years ago because of the story on PFAS.
Yes.
Which is awesome. And I remember because y'all ended up using at least a clip or two of some of our folks in Wilmington, because there was a professor from UNCW. And so I remember we chatted a little bit about like, because I was like, how did you get to be a producer? But like, yeah, let me just start there. How did you get to be a producer on the show? I feel like that's probably a very coveted position.
You're right. It is a coveted position. And there's a short answer and a long answer, right? The short answer is, you know, I was kind of in the right place at the right time. And the opportunity came up. And I was like, you know, of course, I had that one moment where I was like, oh, I don't know, you know, like that seems intimidating. Like that's probably too ambitious for me to get that role. And then I gave myself like a minute to feel that. And then I was like, what the hell are you talking about? Go for it. So, and then, you know, of course, it worked out. So I ended up coming across the opportunity because I was part of a listserv for professional opportunities. And so I always tell people, this is practical advice, okay? I always tell people, get yourself connected to any kind of email, Facebook, or any kind of listserv, email lists that will connect you with opportunities, because it's a good way to learn at the very least what is out there. And for me, actually, when I signed up for this, it was actually a women's networking group. It's women and non-binary networking. And the woman who actually added me to the group, she saw my professional history. She saw my resume, and she said, oh, I actually know of someone in this group who's looking for someone that I think you'd be great for. And that was the show. And I was like, oh, that's when I had my moment of doubt. But that is how it came about. So I always tell people, you need to position yourself so that the opportunities are coming your way, right? Like, I didn't think I would be starting this interview quoting the Barefoot Contessa, but she just released a memoir, and I believe the title is something like "Be Ready When the Luck Happens," right? Like, like you kind of have to be savvy. I always tell people that.
That's such an amazing plug for just
the Barefoot Contessa.
I mean, I was just going to say for email listservs. Like,
I know.
Like, that's amazing.
I know. I do think, though, and this is more of an industry thing, and this is where it gets, well, you say you want real advice. So this is where I get a little bit, what's the word? Gloomy. Okay.
Yeah.
Even before the show, when I was on a show prior to that, I mean, that's where I would say I really got my start in my career in television, right? The industry as a whole was going in a different direction than it's going now. And it is harder now. For example, the same group that I was part of to get the job is now, and I don't say this as a detriment to the group, it's just a reflection of the reality of the industry. It's now very much taken up with, I'm really looking for a job. I've been out of work for a long time. The growth has contracted. So to be quite honest with you, I don't know that everything would go the same today as it went 7 years ago for me. So that's something that I always tell newer people to the industry. I don't want to say young necessarily, because, you can change jobs and enter the industry at any age, but it's certainly a more difficult nut to crack now. So I am speaking to a person who, I'm very much of my sort of time and place. I started when documentary was really exploding, and that certainly helped my career, right? So, yeah, that's my gloomy part.
You call it gloomy. I mean, that's just honesty there. And I feel like that's the type of advice that, especially like, I'll meet like doughy-eyed, excited, about to graduate college, or maybe they're like, oh, I'm going to go into film school, or I'm going to move to New York. And, I mean, I don't feel like I think it's actually a really important thing to save people heartbreak, or potentially like investing in an expectation that's not reality, as opposed to being like, no, dude, like, things are changing. They keep changing. The people who have been doing things and felt stable themselves are questioning how things will look in a year.
Yes.
So like, I don't know, I've been doing whatever I'm doing for 7 years now. I don't know, somehow this has been my job for 7 years. It doesn't make sense, actually. I've literally just been working on a few really important documentaries. I have my own way. I have my own niche. Honestly, most of that came from, I didn't work in this industry. I had quit sort of creative work and film for a while. And I mostly just focused on, okay, I see that this is an unsustainable landscape. I see that like the funding infrastructure for documentary is abysmal. And so I came at it from a totally different approach. I'm very much like issue-based, focused. I don't know. I feel like half of my job is just like, I'm a good fundraiser.
Well, that's a really great thing to be.
Blessing and a curse, it's great when the money's coming in. It's super annoying when you have 100 meetings in a row that all say no, but but I think that's great that you're being honest about it. What you're saying about how the industry has shifted, and how this group, for instance, is, we're all in a dry spell, and I don't think that's necessarily going to change. I mean, it feels similar to like telling 20-year-olds like, yeah, by the way, if you want to buy a house, well, like 20 years ago is really easy compared to now.
Yeah. I don't want to sound like that, right? For sure.
You're striking a good balance. I mean, it's true. And I mean, I'll just mention, like, even though things are scary and changing, I think creative people are creative, right? And like, one of my things is always to be like, can you employ that creativity in maybe like what's it going to look like to earn a living in living? Like, is there a way? Like, that's literally been my approach, is like, I was like, I want to make these stories and I want to make it work. Let me just like try things that other people don't know because they don't try. Like everyone tries the same 3 things in documentary and then they fail and then they give up. So, and I think this applies for other industries, like other realms of creative work too. I mean, we're also seeing a lot of interesting changes on like a resurgence in interest in original writing, what with like Substack. I don't know. A lot of like the journalists that I know are very into this. Everyone's moving to Substack.
Yes, I know.
Which I should, it's funny I'm saying this. We are going to use Substack probably as our like hoster for the podcast. And also our just general listserv because it's a good platform.
It is. Like. It's useful for sure.
It's useful, right? Because social media is a shit show.
To
put it mildly. Okay, so this is a job application essentially that came through this. It
was more like an opportunity, right? Like someone knew someone who was looking, and I just kind of, I guess, dinged a bell for them, I guess, and
but
so
they interviewed you, right?
Yes, that was scary.
Okay. Wait, who was it? Just like some folks that worked on staff? Did John interview you?
Yes.
Was that part of it?
Yes, but.
Ooh.
You know, I had worked for years prior to that on a show where we did celebrity interviews. So, and then prior to that, actually, this is kind of, so prior to that, I had a whole other career. Okay. So I worked for British Airways for many years, and we also had a lot of celebrity passengers, and like, so it's not like, oh, I can keep my cool so well because, of course, it's very exciting. I'm just like everybody else. It's really cool and exciting to meet celebrities. I'm sorry. I wish I could be more blasé about it. But even to this day, when I see Hugh Jackman walk out of a restaurant, I'm like, oh my God, it's Hugh Jackman, in my head. Right. So, I'm glad. Let me just put it that way. I'm glad that I had some preparation. And it ended up being the interview ended up being a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
I can only imagine. Is it still, you're still there, so probably something about it's quite good. Is it still like you like the people, you love the people, it's a fun environment?
Yeah, I mean, the people that work there are really the smartest, funniest people. I mean, I really have nothing but good things to say. I mean, my best friends in life I've met on the show, some of my best friends, and also I've met some of my best friends from the work I did prior to the show on other shows. And that is actually, I think, practical career advice because I think making genuine connections with people has served me well. When I worked in a more corporate world, I always kind of had a wall up that was like, there's me at work and then there's me. Because I felt like the real me was not acceptable in that environment. But I found quickly that in a very creative, like a TV production environment, I found that the wall could come down and I made really strong connections. And those personal relationships, they end up serving you professionally as well because people like to work with their friends. Days on set are long and grueling, and any project is really quite a battle to get off the ground. And it involves a lot of trust. It involves a lot of emotion. You really have to depend on people. When you have good chemistry, everything is just better. I think the work it's just better. So I really encourage people to make friends, really. Like, it sounds a bit Mr. Rogers, but it's true. And I've done that in the past when I'm trying to reach out to somebody, because I do this. If I like their work, I will send them an email and be like, let's be friends. And it, sometimes it actually leads to a friendship for sure. You have to not be shy. You have to ask.
To build off of one of the elements, do you listen to there's a great podcast called Hidden Brain.
No.
I don't know if you've heard about it. There's so many podcasts these days. Well, it's exceptional. Honestly, it's like so prescient. It came from like really established NPR science journalists. Anyways, he interviews all these psychologists all the time. And this exact concept that you're describing came up on a recent episode of the ways in which our professional selves and our like personal selves, like our actual selves, this like conflict that arises, and how like, I mean, pretty much exactly what you said. Like when you're putting up that wall, when you're depriving other people of your authenticity, like, and losing that vulnerability, you're never going to be able to truly connect with those people. And in another way, I have a friend who's a researcher who literally investigates this concept of like, why is it that we mask certain parts of our identities, you know, and how hard is that for us psychologically? I think about this a lot, to be honest. I think it's not only stifles probably like our professional growth, right? Because it's just like we're being fake versions of ourselves, right? Like nobody wants that. Everyone can tell when someone's in some sort of like corporate businessy, like, what? You know, you're saying something you don't actually give a shit about, right?
Yeah.
Well, you don't actually believe in. And I think it's also really painful for us to like live through that. So I love hearing that like this environment, this work environment can actually foster that and create that. It's no surprise that y'all have such a fantastic show. I mean, I think that authenticity is probably where the vibrancy comes out in the creative work.
For sure.
I did that a long time too, where I was nervous because a lot of my work, whether that's the fundraising or even like when I'm going on tour and I'm like being an advocate and telling my own story, if I don't share the vulnerable parts and the hard parts and the real parts, like it just doesn't work. It doesn't land. But like just showing up and being yourself, even if, you know, you're weird
yeah,
or different. Yeah, it's absolutely 100% it's the way to be. And
also, I want to say that I think all the time about what, you know, I feel incredibly lucky, and I do feel like it's a privilege, truly, to be in an environment where I feel like I can be myself. Because I had those years where I was in a corporate environment, and I had a lot of fun there too, don't get me wrong. But there was always, I literally had to wear a suit to work, okay? Like it was, and look, there is a place for that. There is. Yeah. And some people are really good at that. And some people actually really need that. But for me, for me, I just found that I am in a better place when I feel like I can just be myself and not worry so much. So yeah, I do feel very lucky, and I think I'm kind of surrounded, you know, in these sort of creative environments where I've worked over the years. I think I'm surrounded by other people who feel the same way. So
do you feel like as soon as you were brought in, like you got the job, you're here, you could just immediately be yourself? Or was it you were in that environment, you saw other people being fully authentic, you felt like over time that you were able to just, okay, I'm going to let the walls down?
So first of all, I would say for me, it actually started on the very first TV show that I worked on. I was 27 and...
Which was?
It's called Finding Your Roots on PBS. And I was 27 and I had been working at British Airways in a corporate office. And I was, to put it simply, I was bored. And I felt that there was something that I had not allowed myself to take the risk to really pursue a creative job. Because it is a risk, or it was for me at that point in my life. Yeah. You know, I wasn't born with like a massive trust fund, okay? So, or any trust fund.
I was going to say, you really emphasized the massive there.
Yeah, so not even a little one. I would take that, but no. So I answered, it was really my boyfriend, now husband, who encouraged me to take this leap into the unknown. This is more sort of like practical advice I would give now that I'm thinking about it. I would say surround yourself by people who like have vision, people who want to take risks and who want to encourage you to be yourself, right? And have adventures, right? So at his encouragement, I started looking around for something else. And I found a Craigslist ad for an internship on this show. And I was actually familiar with the show, and something about it, I don't know, I was just like, oh, I think that could be a good fit for me. And so I applied, and I ended up getting the internship. So when I was 27, I had to leave my, salary, 401k. I had flight benefits. I made the decision to leave that and become an intern for a PBS TV show. So also,
Brave.
Ding, 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 practical advice, have some money saved. Like really, if you are working somewhere else, try to squirrel away as much as you can so that when the time comes, when the opportunity comes, you can take the leap, right? So I was like, I don't know if this is the craziest decision I'll ever make, but I will take this internship. And I did. And of course, it was the best decision I ever made professionally. So it was when I started feeling like my job was not just a job, that it was actually sort of an expression of who I am as a person, right? Like what I got to do on that show was not just what I wanted to do, but what I was really good at. And it really moved me, it's like, I guess, a form of self-actualization, right? To use the psychological term. And I think once I reached that point, I was like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry as much about pleasing people all the time or appearing a certain way that is, always buttoned up. And also some of it comes down to just like, I feel like I can make jokes with my friends and just relax a little bit. I think that might be the best word for it. And I think creativity comes from relaxation, actually, from a relaxed mind. So that is when I started feeling that way, that like I wasn't sort of separating myself into a work professional identity and a real me identity. It was kind of like cohesive for the first time.
I feel like now I almost want to take this whole, like what you're bringing up is so existentially important. Like, I love how you've just sort of moved us into a whole philosophical discussion as to like how we understand our value as human beings.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, I'm also doing a terrible job as host because I'm just like, I'm sure you hear all the time, like you're a really good storyteller. So I'm getting swept away in like, wow, this is just really true. It's like, why am I drawn to the work that I do? It's because like getting to see the impact that I can have on people's actual lives is worth so much more than like anything that a normal job might be able to provide, even if it's scary and risky.
Yes. And also though, Elijah, you have been able, this is like the key, right? You have been able to hustle, right? You've identified that you're skilled at raising funding. And at the end of the day, this is what everyone needs in this field, right? We all need funding, whether you're an artist, whether you're a documentary director, a producer, you need money. And, you identify the practical steps. And so you were able to make it work for yourself. It's like there are many things that have to come together, right? And so you made it work for yourself. And I'm willing to bet that when you set out on your sort of professional course, that you did not know all of this in advance, right? Like you kind of learned on the way, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I just like you did not come from a major trust fund. I came from a no trust fund background.
Or any trust fund.
That's right. And sometimes, I do think about how I think, not to make light, I think that everyone should have like universal basic income. We should have our basic needs met. But that being said, I do think that there is more that a mind can do. Like we can learn from having very little how to become, I don't know, more resilient or like better at like, making things happen or getting resources because, it's sort of
I completely agree. I completely agree.
My brother would point out, yes, but it's not true that everyone in poverty just figures out how to make it work. That being
of course
said,
not.
You can gain from having little. Obviously not.
No, of course not. That is a huge issue.
I should do my job as the host maybe a tiny bit and re-rail us just a tiny bit. What is the life of a producer for somebody that doesn't know? Just like keep it simple. Like, what are you doing Give us some examples. What does that even mean? It's like the most nebulous term in the whole industry.
It's true. There's a lot of different types of producers, okay? There's the type of producers who are concerned more with financing, right? Who are sort of like business people. And there are producers who are almost entirely on the creative side. You know, for example, when I worked on Finding Your Roots, I was a producer and I was writing scripts, I was doing research, I was managing shoots, you know, doing a little bit of everything, that kind of producer. So, yeah, I would say the most simple way to break it down is you're getting something made. That's your job. And you know, you're very often, I would say, your drive, right? Like, it's not just a job. And so that, I guess, is how I would describe it, you know, getting things made, whether it's an episode of a show or documentary or whatever.
Paint me a picture. What's a day of work like working on a show?
Okay, working on, let's say, a TV show in a major market like New York, okay? Again, it could be very different, but I'm thinking across my various jobs and my friends, sort of, to kind of come up with like a composite answer for you, which would be also the world does look very different post-COVID, actually, because people are working remotely a lot more still in this industry. And even pre-COVID, I would say it was more hospitable to remote work. I knew people who worked purely remotely well before COVID. But generally, I would say you get up, you go to an office, kind of just like everybody else, right? You start answering emails. You know, you have all of these balls in the air and you're figuring them out. And there's a lot of research that I think is involved with being a producer. You are finding characters. You are finding stories. You are following up with your existing threads that you have going, okay? You are talking to people. There, you know, there's a lot of phone calls with experts, right? Like when I worked on Roots, I would spend a lot of time talking to genealogists, talking to sort of professors and experts and specialists in like obscure topics, you know, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, I spend a lot of time talking to people. Yeah. And then, you know, every day you're just kind of chipping away at a project. And that's sort of like the everyday. And then there are shoot days, which are totally different, right? That starts at like 4 a.m. and you have a whole crew and the day goes by so quickly because there's a lot of pressure on a shoot day.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people on the payroll, right, for the day. And you know, you really only get one shot most of the time with a shoot, right? So you really want it to go according to plan or at least well, okay? So that's a totally different thing.
Slightly specific, because I'm very interested in this and I know that I'm like a lot of folks listening are going to be curious. Can you walk me through like what does a shoot day look like these days? I know you've moved, so you're probably not on shoot days for last week.
Well,
when you were there.
Yeah. So that I think that's pretty easy because a studio show is very consistent. And, you know, there's a lot of late night shows that tape multiple times a week. Right. So in a sense, you know, we're kind of lucky to only have to do it once. But a studio show is actually pretty consistent. You have like a pre-planned production schedule well in advance because you're working with a network. And those jobs are actually pretty conducive to stability in your life, right? And I think that's another reason why they're desirable. But even within these shows, there's still teams that are doing field shoots, you know, for sort of one-off interviews or parodies or what have you. So there's sort of like a sub-team who are working more like a traditional production team where it's more kind of up in the air. There's a lot of different types of producers working on these shows. There's a lot of different types of teams. A lot of people, I think.
Yeah. I've worked only on one really, really big set before, which was for like a Nicholas Sparks film. Book
which one?
Do I have to say?
Yes.
It wasn't The Notebook.
But there have been quite a few of those.
It was called Safe Haven.
I don't know that one.
It was.
I mean, I said that like I would know it.
Like you know. I mean, you know, fun fact. So that movie, I'm pretty sure you can actually just watch free on YouTube now.
Okay.
And I've never seen the movie, But I did essentially one role, genuinely a hurry up and wait the whole fucking experience.
Yeah, that's how a lot of
Except
shoots
for
are. Yeah.
the one day that they're like, we need you. You have to go and get a fish. Kid needs to catch a fish in the movie.
Nice.
And so I went to the pier and like was chatting up random people fishing and bought the fish. So if you watch that movie, I didn't get the correct credit, but there's a fish that the kid catches. And I got that fish.
You
So I
got
was
that
the
fish.
producer in that sense.
Yeah, I mean that's very
I
much
produced the fish.
that's very much how it is, right? Like
No, but I think my main point is just like there were so many people on the set. And,
Yes.
like, in that case, it was egregiously wasteful. Like the whole experience was like, oh my God, I could make a movie for way less waste. And this is absurd. Why do we have two doubles?
Yeah,
of
people
the
have
main
all kinds of
actors?
different budgets, right? But a lot of it
Makes no
has to
sense.
do, it gets complicated, right? Like a big studio movie, there's a lot of union rules you have to respect, right? Like, so yeah, it can get quite complex. And I personally have never been in charge from like a business standpoint of such a large and complicated endeavor. It's not necessarily the thing. It's like, I would never say never, but I think I've just kind of migrated with my skill set toward other types of producing.
What do you feel like your strongest skills as a producer are?
I'm a really good researcher. And I'm really good generally at talking to people and getting them to sort of reveal themselves to me. But I think the common denominator between those things is that I'm just really curious and prone to following the curiosity.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, it feels like you have to be if you're in this line of work. Otherwise,
Yeah.
you get bored.
Yeah.
Can you share like a major either failure or like a challenge? Ideally a failure, like something that it was just a big mistake, you wish you hadn't done it, and now you'll never make that mistake again. Like a lesson that we can learn.
There's a lot of different ways to answer this question, right? And like, I think the first thing that's coming to mind is I make mistakes every day, right? And I think the trick is to not necessarily, God, this sounds so corny. It's to not necessarily look at it as a mistake. It's just like, okay, this was an opportunity for me to find out what didn't work, okay? Because any creative process is a series of mistakes for better or worse, right? And so I think it's actually really important to make those mistakes, which I think of them as like little risks, right? And a more concrete way that I could describe this is on any show, or if you're a writer, pitching editors, you have to pitch a lot, right? You have to pitch a lot of ideas. You, Elijah, have to pitch to investors, right? Like, so you have to be prepared to hear no again and again and again. And you have to take the no and be like, okay, well, maybe this is what didn't work. This is not right for this reason. I'll try it from this angle, or I'll try this kind of story. And instead of being discouraged, you have to just kind of look at it as an opportunity to find out what does work. So yeah, like a million tiny failures throughout my career. Now, there are the kinds of failures where you're like, oh shit. Like, I really fucked up.
That's what I want. Can you give me one of those?
Yeah. So I think something to be aware of in general, and this is across all jobs, whether you are on a TV show or at an airport or in a creative industry or not, I think it's really good to read the room. And you do need to get a grasp on the politics of wherever you are working, okay? And for me, I think looking back at like cringeworthy moments in my career may have been times where I didn't quite get the politics. And so I would say just maybe pissed somebody off with what I said, or yeah. I remember one time I was working. This is a concrete example, and it's actually not my mistake. However, it's a mistake I could have made, so I'll use this. Sure. I was working on a documentary that was like really scrappy, and I was working on it with friends, and all of the friends, we were doing it for free or for deferred payment. But we had to hire a sound guy on site because sound is really important, and it's like the first thing that people forget. So don't forget sound. So we did have to pay the sound guy, the local sound guy, because he wasn't our pal, you know. So so somebody let it slip to our DP that the sound guy was getting paid. And, you know, the DP, who was a friend, but he was kind of like, hey, I was under the impression that nobody was, you know what I mean? Just, you have to be sensitive, okay? Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. And because I don't want to say like, oh, you have to walk around being scared all the time, but you need to be sensitive to the situation. Let me put it that way. I know that I've had times before where I said, oh, I don't know if that works or something. And I said it to somebody who really didn't want to hear it from me. Okay. And I know for a fact that was like a little nail sort of in the coffin of our relationship. And you never know when it's going to happen. And I think also, as I say this, I have to say also, you have to accept that it is going to happen. Right. And just kind of move on. Let's just say that over the decade of work, I've seen a lot of people crying in the bathroom, okay? And it's just going to happen. You're going to have a day when you cry in the bathroom. I've had the day where I cry in the bathroom. But, you know, do try to make it to the bathroom to cry. I would advise that.
Wow. I liked both the start here of the platitude. It wasn't even that you said it like it was a platitude of like, well, you know, every mistake is actually just learning how something doesn't work. Like that's honestly, it's like still kind of like good advice just to be reminded of.
I mean, that's what most mistakes look like, right? Like it's true. Not every mistake is going to send you crying to the bathroom, right? There's a distinction, I think.
The fundraisers that I talk to when I'm wearing that hat, their whole thing is like, you know, each rejection is like one step closer to the yes, right? Like, but it's sort of the same idea. Well, what's interesting is their advice is worse because their advice is like, don't reflect on what you did wrong. Maybe it's just that you talked to the wrong person. And I do think that there's something to be said that like both of those are true. Sometimes you have great ideas and the person listening just is wrong or
that's
like
true.
Is not the right person, you know. Sometimes
that's
we
absolutely
true. Need to iterate on our own idea. I often find this to be the case, like for instance during a feedback screening of like one of my projects or something. Like I value sometimes hearing opinions that I fundamentally disagree with and think are wrong. If anything, it can not to be like I'm right always. I'm not. I'm certainly wrong plenty of the time. But I think as a creative, really, you can't please everybody. You know that you can't please everybody. And so you do, to an extent, need to be able to trust your own instinct and flavor and style and hear somebody be like, oh, actually, no. And you'd be like, cool, great. I disagree. But thanks for letting me know that.
Yeah.
You know?
Of course, you have to have a backbone.
That's exactly right. You said theater. Are you still engaged in the theater at the moment? Are you acting?
So that is an interesting question because now, because I'm being in Korea, that's kind of what I'm doing the most of because it's just kind of the way it's worked out. So, you know, it's all voluntary. There's not actually not a large market for English language theater here. It's like pretty much all community based. So that is the capacity where I'm doing a lot of work right now. Like I'm doing a sketch show here, like a live sketch show. And it's not improv, it's sketch. But a lot of the people, the performers and the writers involved are coming from the improv scene here in Korea, which is like a growing scene. And, you know, it existed far before I arrived. But this is an example of, you know, I came here and I was like, okay, well, I need to make friends and I need to do fun stuff. So I just, you know, Googled and found people who were doing English language comedy and wrote to them. And, you know, now we're friends, right? It was as simple as that kind of. And
Megan,
so
I'm seeing the constant theme of your life, which is just like you're a brave person who reaches out and and takes that leap and just says, I'm going to put myself out there. And then the universe is like, and you shall be rewarded.
Well, you can't be shy. I mean, who am I to say? Right? But for me, this is what works for me. Like, I'm not shy. Yeah. And so it served me well. And I think if you are...
We have to pour one out for the introvert creatives.
Yeah, if you are more introverted, and first of all, let me say that I consider myself neither an extrovert nor an introvert. Okay. I think I'm like truly in the middle. Like, I need the recharge time, and then I need the with a crowd time. So I relate.
There's a word for this.
I understand.
Have you heard? There's a stupid word for this. Have you heard the word for the hybrid?
No.
It's called an ambivert.
No, I haven't heard it. I'm an ambivert. I love that. That's me.
Okay.
I feel seen. Yeah. So like there are days where I like, oh no, I do not want to go to this thing and meet people today. Like, hell no. But then, I drag my ass there, and what happens? I meat someone interesting who becomes like integral to my life in some way. So like you really do have to dig for the energy. It's not always easy. It's not always easy. So that is definitely a common denominator in my career, for sure.
Yeah. And it sounds like your role really in like the theater space now is about nourishing your like artistic or creative interests. Can I understand that right? Like, you're doing it because it's fun.
Exactly. I'm doing it because it's fun. It's for the love of comedy, which is, I mean, it sounds so corny and pure and naive, right? But the people that I work with in this group are really talented, and nobody is trying to use this as their launch pad into Saturday Night Live, like, so it's not cutthroat. It's not competitive. We have great chemistry as a team, so we can be honest with each other. We can get mad at each other and then make up. All of there's room for everything, right? And so I kind of feel like I'm a little bit like I'm in college again, just doing something purely for the love of doing it. And it's fun. It's really fun. I definitely recommend some kind of outlet like this to everybody. Yeah. Try to make the time. I also really recommend, this is not something you asked, but as far as like professional advice, I always try to be taking some kind of class, whether it's related to my career or not. Whatever I learn finds a way into, the big picture.
Yeah. I mean, this also just goes back to another theme that I've learned about you, of just your insatiable curiosity.
It can be a curse.
I mean, listen, we have apparently quite a few things in common. That is one of those things. I always learn things. But, you end up having so many different things bopping around in your head that it's like, okay, cool. How do I focus?
Yeah, no, it's really a challenge. It is a challenge. Yeah.
My friend, I have a friend who talked to about this a lot. He describes this as trying to weaponize ADHD, or it's like this component of like being able to learn a lot of, interesting things and hold on to them. I think it can absolutely be really great in like creative jobs, but also just it's fun. It's just, the universe really does have a lot to offer us. I think it's fun to get to like actually explore and not just be boring and, like interested in just one thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you kind of have to embrace the way your mind works, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of just jumping back, if someone was like, I want to produce for shows in New York City or wherever it is that people are actually financing producers to work on shows, what's your advice to that person? Not necessarily a young person, but a person breaking into the industry.
That's a tough question to answer. I want to do a good job of it because it's quite a broad question, right? Something that I recognized as helpful in my own career and that I often tell people who are coming up, find a place to work where you are going to be able to grow, okay?
Yeah.
Find a place, whether that means it's a company that's growing or a segment of the industry or a topic that is growing in popularity. Find somewhere where there's going to be space for you to move forward. What does this look like? I would say find a place with senior staff who actively invest in building relationships and mentoring newer staff, okay? Not every place is like that.
But how do you find that?
So trial and error might be one thing.
Okay.
But luck might be another thing. For me, it was getting an internship from Craigslist. Okay. Really, honestly, what it might look like for a lot of people who are starting off here, something like that. I'm not going to get into like the politics of internships here because that's like a whole topic unto itself, right? But all I can say is I did start my career with an internship and I did not have a trust fund. I was able to do it because I was 27 and I had worked an entire 5 years in another career, right? And I had used that to like save my money. Maybe that's what you have to do. And I did have a time where I guess I felt sorry for myself because I wasn't doing what I wanted to do. And then I guess eventually I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take the steps to do it, right? You have to be smart about it. So when I went to this internship, I got lucky because I was able to see that there was opportunity for growth. I could move from an intern to a researcher to an associate producer to a producer. You know what I mean? The ladder is there. And I guess I should say, in terms of practical advice, if you do want to be staffed on a TV show, like a nonfiction TV show, I can't speak to fiction because I haven't worked there. But that's generally the rank, right? Like intern, production assistant or researcher, AP, associate producer, and then you kind of move up into like supervising producer, executive producer, etc. So yeah, find people who, you know what, I want to say find people who care about you, but quite frankly, they don't even really have to care about you as long as they're willing to move you upward, right? Like there's all, like you need to find a place where you have opportunity. Mm-hmm. I have seen people land just like really cool internships at places where they actually had no opportunity for growth. And so it kind of just ended there. So maybe look in a place that is not that cool, right? Like maybe the super cool internship is not going to be your door. Maybe you should look somewhere a little like crappier or more boring or less glamorous, and that will actually be your avenue upward.
I've just taken the time here now, upon reflecting on all of the nuggets of advice that you've given us throughout this discussion. Would you like to hear them?
Oh boy. I do and I don't.
They're great. And also I tried to lump the themes together.
I'm going to laugh really hard if I'm contradicting myself all over the place. So
You're not, though. I mean, you're really not. There's a lot of, it's funny because your advice is honestly just like, in some cases, just explaining what you've done.
Yeah. Because that's all I can do, really.
Right. No, and that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so here it is. Here's a list. This is Megan's advice on how to live and be successful. Always ask. Don't be shy.
Okay.
Always. Always take the interview.
Okay.
Always continue learning.
Okay.
Taking a class every so often. Build authentic human connections.
Okay.
Build your bag so that you can take risks. Mm-hmm. Surround yourself with brave other risk takers.
Yeah.
And surround yourself with listservs.
Yeah.
Honestly, all excellent advice. I mean, specifically, mostly, I think the first one, the always asking, like never being afraid to ask. Like,
yeah. Or like, even if you're afraid to ask, that's okay. Just do it anyway, right?
Right. I feel like, honestly, when you're afraid to ask, it's a sign that you should.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's a sign that it could be transformational and nothing great happens because you decided to not give it a try. You know?
It's true. It's true. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Thank you for taking us there. I mean, it's right though. Like
I know.
we like breezed past this, but when you're talking about interacting with celebrities, like, of course, I've probably mentioned that, like, eventually I was able to bring Mark Ruffalo,
Yes.
you know, who's a relatively well-known name, on not only just to interview for my projects, but also as a producer.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I should actually be, whatever, it's my show. I cannot even count the number of times that I was told no.
Yeah, I bet.
By the millions of gatekeepers that operate around this man's life.
Yes.
And you know what? If I had just accepted that and if I had learned, like, okay, I should just not ask, I wouldn't now have him as a producer. And like, I was literally talking with his team yesterday. I'm actually like, one of his personal best friends is now like one of my best friends. It's
really?
So weird. It's weird how, like, yeah, it's, I can't even, we would need another hour.
Yeah. I mean, I love
like,
Mark Ruffalo. So
yeah, well,
he's one of my favorite actors.
Have you ever met him?
No, I've never met Mark Ruffalo. But you know what? I remember when I first talked to you, it was back in 2020, which was sadly like almost 5 years ago, actually, Elijah.
Oh
but
yeah.
You asked me if I knew Mark Ruffalo. you were like, can you tried? You were like, do you have a connection to Mark Ruffalo? And that's a great example. And you know what? When you asked me that, I didn't. But I thought to myself, I was like, this guy is totally gonna get Mark Ruffalo as a I totally could have predicted that about you because you were determined, and you were determined for the right person, right? Like Mark Ruffalo, he cares, right? Like this is, you know, he's a guy who would sign on to something like this, right?
He literally, I mean, it's so funny, like, no, just like full honesty, and everyone that works with him says the same thing. He is so unlike most people that are at his level of fame. Like, truly, and this is probably why he has like 1 million people whose job it is to just say no for him.
That's a great
like,
point.
What? I mean, he can't do everything, right?
Yeah.
We all have limited time. Once we were in the room, this is me sharing real professional advice. I waited until the moment that we had him there for the interview where no one else could be between us. And right when we finished rapping and we were like about to maybe never see him again, I was like, by the way, would you be willing to join as a producer? So no manager, I mean, obviously his like assistant and stuff was there, but it was
she was
him.
probably
you know
like dying inside as you leapt forward.
What do you think he said? I was just like, you know, flat out, I'm just like,
he was probably like, yes. Filmmaker. He said yes, right?
Immediately.
Yeah.
No hesitation. He said, of course I will. Of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. No hesitation. Tell me what I can do. Literally heart of gold.
Yeah.
Incredibly kind person.
That is a good lesson, though. That interaction you just described, it's really important because finding people in the right place and the right time, super important.
We also brought him flowers because I was like, he's way wealthier than me. He has access to everything, but I can bring him flowers that we grew in our own garden.
Aww.
We took the train up to New York, and I was like, he might think it's sweet because like they're our flowers, we grew them.
Yeah.
And you know what? It was, I swear to God, it's like giving a kid like a video game or something. He was like, oh my God, this is the sweet, and you put them in a little cup. Oh my God, they're beautiful. We have photos that we took together of him receiving the flower. It was, anyways, angel. Absolute angel. But yeah, no, this is just going back to, what's your life advice number 4? Building authentic connections. Like,
yeah, see?
that was it. Like, we were vibing. I mean, it was a surreal experience. At one point in the middle of the interview, he was like, wow, you're really good at interviews. And I like almost just like my whole, my body just like left my brain, like everything short circuited. I was like, I don't know how to process this.
Yeah.
This is a big compliment coming from you.
Yeah.
All right. Sorry. I'm getting too far off in this whole story.
This is the Mark Ruffalo podcast.
It is.
We love Mark Ruffalo, and we're just going to talk about it.
Let me just address our 2 remaining questions so that I make sure that we hit all of our bases, which is, with your experience in crafting stories as a producer, as a writer, as a director, as an actor, and a person involved in all these fun activities, what do you feel like is like a component of any great story. And let me preface, this could be a poem, this could be a movie, this could be a speech, this could be a song.
Okay.
This could be a visual work of art. Maybe we won't go that abstract. Give me an essence of any great story.
So I do have sort of an essential answer for you, because it's advice that somebody gave me many years ago. It was a producer that I was working with on another show. Okay. And we were talking about stories, and he was like, listen. He's very New York. He's like, listen. A story, it needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I was like, okay. And it sounds really simple, right? But that simplicity, I think, is very useful to remember again and again and again and again as you are crafting your narratives. It also helps you recognize what is a story and what is not, right? Because if you're in the business of like documentary, if you're a journalist, you're often looking for a story. And you have to be able to say, does this have the basic shape of beginning, middle, and end? If not, it might be a great anecdote, right? Like it could be part of a story, but it in and of itself is not a story. I think that's important to remember. Even a painting, a painting tells a story. Like
it can.
Yeah, a good one.
Yes, right. I like how I feel like you're coming back to a lot of like common tropes and metaphors, and you're just like asking the audience like, okay, right, but let's look at it from a slightly different angle here, because there's actually some valuable nuggets in this.
Yes.
It's a common theme.
Yes, we don't need to overcomplicate things.
That's true. Brevity is the soul of wit, as Shakespeare once said.
Is it Shakespeare?
That's Bill Shakespeare, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know. That's what my dad told me.
Okay.
Should I fact check us?
Well, it feels like it could be Oscar Wilde, but you might be right here. I'm looking. Hold on.
It's Shakespeare. That's
okay.
Shakespeare.
All right. Your dad is off the hook. Okay.
Google result. Yeah. My dad reads a lot, so I generally trust him. Okay. A few really quick rapid fires, just because we're like probably should be wrapping up here in a minute.
Okay.
But I just have a few more things I want to ask. You can skip if you don't want to. But when you were working at British Airways and then you quit to become an intern, you can use specific numbers or not if you want. Like some people do, some people don't. How much of like a pay drop? How much would you say you were like earning? Either like you can describe it literally numerically, or you can be like, I was living very comfortably, and then I was basically broke all the time. Like at what point did it go from British Airways, screw it, I'm going to do creative work now, and then, okay, I'm actually like, I can pay for my living expenses, or I'm living comfortably.
Okay, so I can answer this pretty concretely, I would say. So my pay drop was 100%.
Wow.
Yeah, my pay drop was 100%. I was living with, the guy who is now my husband. And so I was fortunate that he wasn't like, you have to pay rent, He was in a job where he could pay the rent. And, that's kind of how it was even before I came along. We had like separate lives and then kind of brought them together. And I probably could have done it without him because I had saved some money. I would say I had probably saved about like 6 months worth of money if I was living like very like to the bone.
In New York specifically though, right?
Yeah, in New York, which is of course very different than other places. Expensive. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And so I think the best word to use to like look for is like support, right? Like it's good to have people who can support you, whatever that looks like. For me, it was having a partner who was like, you know what, I'll take the hit for 6 months so that you can do this, right? And you know what? Eventually, later on in our life together, we had the reverse situation. And he took 6 months off of paid work so that he could pursue something while I was the one who was the breadwinner. So, it's a give and take. Obviously, that's much easier if you have a partner. Many of us do not. And that's where it kind of comes down to like, what are your other sources of support? How much can you save for yourself, and how much can you get from other people? And that might not necessarily be just money, right? So yeah, I was in a pretty good situation, but if I had not been successful, I can't say for sure what would have happened, but could have been financially catastrophic. That's just the reality.
I mean, I feel like I know and have been in that same situation myself. I also love that your trajectory had that beautiful harmony where it was like you had that period and then your partner also had that period and you were able to provide that, like reciprocity. I think that's really special because we don't always get that opportunity.
Yeah.
How can you share to any specificity how well you were being paid with British Airways and then to go to nothing? I mean, it's New York City. I can estimate. This is also like 2017, 2016.
No, I left BA in 2014. So that's like more than 10 years ago. So I think it's fair to say I was making, I'll say this, I was making under $100,000 a year. Okay. Which in New York,
especially nowadays.
Yeah. I hate to sound like, I know people make all different types of salaries and they do survive in New York. So but it's tough. I lived in Manhattan and everything is very expensive. Rent is very expensive. Food, everything is expensive. Food, etc. And it gets even more complicated if you have kids.
Yeah.
Yes.
And y'all have kids.
And I do recommend, I am glad that I took these kind of leaps before I had my first kid and had a bit of stability. It's not to say that you can't do it if you do have a kid, but let's just say for me personally, I'm glad that I did it before.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I mean, I think I would give the same advice too, of just like trying to find stability first, take advantage of the time that you don't have as many dependents or any dependents to be riskier. And I'm going to go back to your advice, which I think is right, of like save what you can when you can, because it affords you the ability to take more risks. Because I do feel like sometimes we have to bet on ourselves, to actually like transform our situation. My last rapid fire, it's 2025 and the world feels on fire. I mean, California was literally just on fire.
Yeah.
Many parts of the world are on fire because of things going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I've been on the show now as a producer for a long time. And so I'll say legitimately for me, it is one of the few sources that I go to because I'm like, I actually just want an unbiased take on the state of things told in a way that I'm not fucking depressed. It's like one of the only experiences that does, honestly, and it's similar to my like approach with documentaries. Like, how do you tell hard like lessons?
Yeah.
But you don't just depress your audience because like that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
So not to put pressure, but like, what are y'all doing right now? I guess is my question with the state of things. Is everything an overdrive? I remember from when we talked 5 years ago a little about the process. There's a lot of research that goes into planning that goes into designing the shows well in advance. And I believe it happens during sort of that downtime, that latency when like new episodes are not being released. Sort of in the winter, at least that's what I can recall.
We were talking in the space between seasons when we were, I was building that story for, and it ultimately, I don't know if you remember, but it didn't air for like at least a year or two, I think, after we spoke.
Took a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes that happens.
I'm still pushing for a follow-up. That's just because I'm following your advice, which is to always ask. And so whenever there's a follow-up, you know who to send an email to. But yeah, what's the state of things? Is everything crazy? Is it different because of how, like the election went in a way that none of us wanted it to?
I hate to disappoint you, but I really, from my vantage point here, I really can't answer that question about the show. I have talked to, what I can say is that I've talked to a lot of comedians. These are actually people who don't work on the show.
Yeah.
but they are, sort of politically engaged, writers and comedians. And I think the sentiment is just like, buckle up, and I don't know how you feel, but the last 2 weeks are just so atrocious that I don't even have an entry point into this discussion. Like I don't even know where to begin. I'm truly stumped. And I think that's probably by design, right? So yeah, it's just like a gigantic fireball in my brain. That's the best I can answer your question. I'm sorry.
I mean, that's honesty here. So
I will
no
say, sorry to interrupt you, but I did talk to somebody who is this was not for the show. because I do like some freelance journalism now. And I was speaking to Anna Escamani, who is a Florida State representative. Okay. So she's very local, because I think that's one of the overarching bits of advice that we're kind of hearing again and again is like, try to make an impact locally, right? And I think you would probably agree with that to some extent. And so I was talking to Anna, and she is a super minority. So she's a Democrat in Florida. So the entire government there is Republican. It's a Republican super majority. And now that is actually what we have in the United States in the federal government. And so I thought it was interesting to talk to somebody who's operating in that kind of dynamic. And, I had this long discussion with her, and it did give me hope. It was very easy to talk to her and say, oh, just because I have the fireball in my brain doesn't mean that everybody else does, right? And having that conversation, it made me feel a hint of optimism that I had not quite felt. And it's because she told me that she is able to get stuff done. She is able to change minds. She's able to fundraise, okay? She just has to work harder to do it. And that I found to be something useful to kind of hang on to. Like, it's not impossible. Wow. It's just going to be a hell of a lot harder.
So we have just hit our 8th and final philosophy life advice from Megan. Not everyone has the fireball in their brain.
Yeah.
Which I kind of love this metaphor. Real talk, all of this 7 years now of having to deal with fucking forever chemical PFAS, terrible, terrible news stuff.
Yeah. No, it's tough stuff.
It's tough stuff. And also, I've realized that I have been the person for a lot of people when we can actually, talk to them in the way that they need to hear it. I am that person, I am the representative that you talk to, teaching them, actually, there's not a fireball in my brain around this because I see action happening. I see change occurring.
Yeah.
I see it on a micro and a macro level.
You're not hopeless. Yeah.
I'm not hopeless at all. I'm actually, incredibly optimistic, which is why I'm excited. Now we're finally about to release this damn story after so many years.
Congratulations.
This many years on a project. Thank you. The story that we're going to tell is in a much better place than I think most people would expect. Mm-hmm. And it's in a better place than it would have been had I released it 2-3 years in, which is what I originally wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't as much hope then, just being frank about it. There wasn't as much happening. So it's a better time.
Yeah.
That's really helpful to hear. I think we all need to be reminded of that. It's another reason, for me personally, I avoid social media. I'm very selective about where I'm receiving updates around the world because there are a lot of things that it's easy to become hopeless. But that's when we have to lean on our community and the people we love and, the good experiences that we can have. And then just what you said, reminders, real reminders, nope, change can actually still happen. In fact, the horrible men in dark corridors who are making all of these horrible things happen want us. That is, in fact, part of the design, is that we will become hopeless and we will feel like there is no opportunity. But there's always an opportunity to do something, even when things appear hopeless. In fact, there's an excellent, Neil Gaiman has a graphic novel series called Sandman. I think it's a show now. But I remember there's like a discussion around this character like fighting a demon or something, and they're doing this thing where they're like, well, I am a mouse. Okay, well, I am a rat who eats, or I'm a snake that eats the mouse, and I am an elephant who steps on the snake. And they're kind of doing this back and forth, like rhetorical fight of like, how do you keep getting worse and worse? And then eventually it escalates to like, I am the end of everything. Like, I am the death of the universe. I am like utter darkness. And the only response to beat this is I am hope. As in like, even in the darkest circumstances, like hope is the one thing that actually may persevere. It is true. Like the one thing that we can all do is like maintain optimism even in the worst situations.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's, it's one thing to hear that, and then it's another to sort of practically implement it, right? Like, I think, so for me, what that looks like is talking to somebody who has hope and is making change, and or reading about something, seeking inspiration, right? It's like an active sort of practice. It looks different for everybody, I think, but it is a practice. Like, it's not some kind of woo-woo, like, hippy-dippy nebulous thing. Like, it's something you have to work at, and I think that's important to remember.
I think you're spot on, and you have to revisit it, and you have to develop it, and you have to remind yourself of it. I'll share like one last 20-second anecdote, because I had this experience. Maybe you could appreciate it too. I was visiting a friend just this past weekend who had an artist residency. She does painting and photography, and I was kind of in a bad place mentally because I was like dealing with some of the challenges of like the profession of my art, of just like getting so stressed around like, okay, but how much money are we going to have to do this and that and the other? I was getting so caught up in like the business side of things because honestly, capitalism sucks, and I feel like it forces that type of thinking on me. And getting to go visit my friend who did this fellowship, and she had like a gallery where her art was on display with several other artists, and she was just so ecstatic and excited and just blissful and happy to just like have had this experience where she just got to spend a few weeks with other artists just looking at the landscape and doing her craft. And like getting to share that. And talking to her, like we hung out over the weekend, and she was telling me like, honestly, the one thing I hate about art is like the selling part, like she doesn't like that part of like the gallery and the like making money from it. And it just like reminded me of like, well, part of the reason creative work matters and art matters is just like in and of itself is valuable. Like the creation is valuable. It is nourishing to create. It is rewarding for us to create. And to me, I don't know, that brought my spirits up a lot of just like, oh my God, not everyone fucking has to just think about this. Like it's both a profession and valuable. It is intrinsically valuable to create, meaningful media. Like
that's true. Yeah, it does not necessarily have to have a market value.
We're going to come to a close, and you've been amazing. Thank you so much. This is really fun. It's been cool to connect after so long.
Yeah, I know.
This is what we end every episode with. What gives you hope for the future?
People who have hope. People who have hope for the future, I think. That's what I have right now. And like I have 2 small children. That's a great example because they're 2 little people who have hope,
Yeah. Poignant and succinct.